From Mom and Me and Mom, Maya Angelou. Background. When Maya Angelou was 3 years old, her brother Bailey was five, her parents divorced and sent the children off to live with their grandmother in Stamps, Arkansas. When Maya was 13, she and Bailey were sent back to San Francisco to live with her mother, Vivian Baxter. Chapter 3. My grandmother made arrangements with two Pullman car porters and a dining car waiter for tickets for herself, my brother, and me. She, she said she and I would go to California first, and Bailey would follow a month later. She said she didn't want me to leave without adult supervision because I was a 13-year-old girl. Bailey would be safe with Uncle Willie. Bailey thought he was looking after Uncle Willie, but the truth was Uncle Willie was looking after him. By the time the train reached California, I had become too frightened to accept the idea that I was going to meet my mother at last. My grandmother took my hand. Sister, there's nothing to be scared for. She is your mother, that's all. We are not surprising her. When she received my letter explaining how Junior was growing up, she invited us to come to California. Grandmother rocked me in her arms and hummed. I calmed down. When we descended the train steps, I looked for someone who could be my mother. When I heard my grandmother's voice call out, I followed the voice and I knew she had made a mistake. But the pretty little woman with red lips and high heels came running to my grandmother. Mother Annie! Mother Annie! Grandmother opened her arms and embraced the woman. When Mamma's arms fell, the woman asked, Where is my baby? She looked around and saw me. I wanted to sink to the ground. I wasn't pretty or even cute. That woman who looked like a movie star deserved a better looking daughter than me. I knew it and was sure she would know it as soon as she saw me. Maya Marguerite, my baby. Suddenly I was wrapped in her arms and in her perfume. She pushed away and looked at me. Oh, baby, you're beautiful and so tall. You look like your daddy and me. I'm so glad to see you. She kissed me. I had not received one kiss in all the years in Arkansas. Often my grandmother would call me and show me off to her visitors. This is my grandbaby. She would stroke me and smile. That was the closest I had come to being kissed. Now Vivian Baxter was kissing my cheeks and my lips and my hands. Since I didn't know what to do, I did nothing. Her home, which was a boarding house, was filled with heavy and very uncomfortable furniture. She showed me a room and said it was mine. I told her I wanted to sleep with Mamma. Vivian said, I suppose you slept with your grandmother in Stamps, but she will be going home soon and you need to get used to sleeping in your own room. My grandmother stayed in California watching me and everything that happened around me. And when she decided that everything was all right, she was happy. I was not. She began to talk about going home and wondering aloud how her crippled son was getting along. I was afraid to let her leave me, but she said, You are with your mother now, and your brother will be coming soon. Trust me. More than that, trust the Lord. He will look after you. Grandmother smiled when my mother played jazz and blues very loudly on her record player. Sometimes she would dance just because she felt like it, alone by herself in the middle of the floor. While grandmother accepted behavior so different, I just couldn't get used to it. My mother watched me without saying much for about 2 weeks. Then we had what was to become a familiar as a sit down talk to. She said, Maya, you disapprove of me because I am not like your grandmother. That's true, I am not. But I am your mother, and I am working some part of my anatomy off to pay for this roof over your head. When you go to school, the teacher will smile at you, and you will smile back. Students don't even know you will smile, and you will smile. But on the other hand, I am your mother. If you can force one smile on your face for strangers, do it for me. I promise you I will appreciate it. She put her hand on my cheek and smiled. Come on, baby, smile for mother. Come on, be charitable. She made a funny face, and against my will I smiled. She kissed me on my lips and started to cry. That's the first time I have seen you smile. It is a beautiful smile. Mother's beautiful daughter can smile. I was not used to being called beautiful. That day I learned that I could be a giver simply by bringing a smile to another person. The ensuing years have taught me that a kind word or a vote of support can be a charitable gift. I can move over and make another place for another to sit. I can turn my music up if it pleases or down if it's annoying. I may never be known as a philanthropist, but I certainly want to be known as charitable. I was beginning to appreciate her. I liked to hear her laugh because I noticed she never laughed at anyone. After a few weeks, it became clear that I was not using any title when I spoke to her. In fact, I rarely started conversations. Most often, I simply responded when I was spoken to. She asked me into her room. She sat on her bed and didn't invite me to join her. Maya, I am your mother. Despite the fact that you left for years, I am your mother. You know that, don't you? I said, Yes, ma'am. I had been answering her briefly with a few words since my arrival in California. You don't have to say ma'am to me. You're not in Arkansas. No, ma'am. I mean, no. You don't want to call me mother, do you? I remained silent. Well, you have to call me something. We can't go through life without you addressing me. What would you like to call me? I'd been thinking of that since I first saw her. I said, lady. What? Lady. Why? Because you are so beautiful and you don't look like a mother. Is lady a person you like? I didn't answer. Is lady a person you might learn to like? She waited as I thought about it. I said yes. Well, that's it. I am lady and still your mother. Yes, ma'am. I mean, yes. At the right time, I will introduce my new name. She left me. I turned up the player and sang loudly with the music. The next day, I realized she must have spoken to my grandmother. Grandmother came into my bedroom. Sister, she is your mother and she does care for you. I said, I'll wait till Bailey gets here. He will know what to do and whether we should call her lady. Chapter 4. Mother, grandmother, and I waited at the railway station. Bailey descended from the train and saw me first. The smile that took over his face made me forget all the discomfort I had felt since coming to California. His eyes found grandmother, and his smile changed to a grin, and he waved to her. Then he saw mother, and his response broke my heart. Suddenly he was a lost little boy who had been found at last. He saw his mother, his home, and then all his lonely birthdays were gone. His nights when scary things made noise under the bed were forgotten. He went to her as if hypnotized. She opened her arms, and she clasped him into her embrace. I felt as if I had stopped breathing. My brother was gone, and he would never come back. He had forgotten everything. But I remembered how he felt on the few occasions when she sent us toys. I poked the eyes out of each doll, and Bailey took huge rocks and smashed to bits the trucks or trains that came wrapped in fancy paper. Grandmother put her arm around me and ahead, and we walked ahead of the others back to the car. She opened the door and sat in the back seat. She looked at me and patted the seat beside her. We left the front seat for the two new lovers. The plan was that grandmother would return to Arkansas 2 days after Bailey arrived. Before Lady and Bailey Jr. reached the car, I said to grandmother, I want to go back home with you, Mama. She asked, why? I said, I don't want to think of you on that train all alone. You will need me. When did you make that decision? I didn't want to answer. She said, when you saw the reunion of your brother and his mother, that she should have such understanding, being an old woman and country too. I thought it was amazing. It was just as well that I had no answer, because Bailey and his mother had already reached the car. Vivian said to grandmother, Mother Annie, I didn't look for you two. I knew you would go to the car. Bailey didn't turn to look at me. His eyes were glued to his mother's face. One thing about you that cannot be denied, you are a true, sensible woman. Grandmother said, Thank you, Vivian. Junior? She had to call twice to get his attention. Junior, how was the train? Did someone make food for your trip? How did you leave Willie? Suddenly he remembered that there was someone else in the world. He grinned at grandmother. Yes, ma'am, but none of them can cook like you. He turned to me and said, What's happening, Mai? Has California got your tongue? You haven't said a word since I got in the car. I made my face as cold as possible. I said, You haven't given me a chance. In a second he said, What's the matter, Mai? I had heard him, and I was glad. I said, I may go back to Sam's with Mama. I wanted to break his heart. No, ma'am, you will not. My grandmother's voice was unusually hard. My mother asked, Why would you leave now? You said all you were waiting on was your brother. Well, here he is. She started the car and pulled it out into the traffic. Bailey turned back to her. He said, Yes, I'm in California. Grandmother held my hand and patted it. I bit the inside of my mouth to keep from crying. No one spoke until we reached our house. Bailey dropped his hand over the back of the front seat. When he wiggled his fingers, I grabbed them. He squeezed my fingers and let them go and drew his hand back to the front seat. The exchange did not escape grandmother's notice, but she said nothing.